Welcome back to Hot Air with me, Joshua Robert, the show where I talk about things that absolutely should not be controversial, yet somehow they still are. And today we're diving into a topic that should have been settled ages ago if our education system was not allergic to, well, real science. And that is being transgender. We are going there today. I've gone there before, so we're going to do it again, but it is Transgender Awareness Week. And so I obviously thought it was important to do this episode. I've been thinking about it for a long time. I wanted to make sure I did enough research and was kind of providing the information in an easy to digest way. And then once I realized it was Transgender Awareness Week, I was like, perfect. We're ready. We're ready to go. And we do have a lot to cover today. We're going to talk about the actual science of gender identity, like the brain stuff, the DNA stuff, the womb stuff, the biology is complicated and not a Facebook meme kind of stuff. And then we're going to take a trip through history because this is not a surprise, and most of us know this. Gender fluidity did not show up in 2016 right next to the avocado toast boom, okay? That's not a thing. Humans have been bending, breaking, and reinventing gender since the dawn of freaking civilization. Ancient Egypt, fluid. Indigenous cultures, fluid. Rome, so fluid it was basically a fucking soup, okay? Tomato soup, maybe. Oh, I could go for some tomato soup. It's a little chilly today. Grilled cheese tomato soup. Now we're off track. Okay, but we're not stopping there. We've got a listener letter from a scientist who listened to an episode I did in the past about the trans community. The letter basically says, yes, correct. And let me drop some more receipts for the people in the back. And I think it's really important when we get this information from educated people. And you already know that anytime a scientist writes involuntarily, you settle in because they always come with the drama and the data. So get comfy. Yes, grab a beverage. Speaking of beverages, I love, shameless plug, but my hot air mug that you can also order from my website, hotairwithjoshuarobert.com. I fucking love it because you can't tell what's in it. It could be wine right now. It could be coffee. It could be water. It could be empty, and I could just be pretending to sip out of it. But actually, it's wine. But anyway, they're so cute. So this is the front if you're on YouTube, the Hot Air logo. The back has the I found your podcast to be egregious logo. And truthfully, these are just so cute and actually really affordable. I literally drink everything out of it all the time. Okay, and as I was saying, grab your beverages, grab your comfort snack, adjust your emotional support hoodie, maybe put the hood up, pull on those drawstrings, and cozy in. And because we're going to get into it. This is going to be a mix of science, history, humor, and a whole lot of love for our transgender siblings. Because honestly, this is long overdue. Again, I've thought about it for a long time. And now is the time. So let's hit it. We are starting with a topic that people love to talk about without actually knowing anything about. Being transgender, what the science says, what the brain says, what DNA says, and why male or female is honestly a lot more complicated than majority of the population likes to pretend that it is. Because let's be real. If sex and gender were as simple as the phrases basic biology that people love to yell online, we wouldn't need an entire episode to explain why they are wrong. But here we are, and I'll do it till I'm blue in the face, okay? So, when someone says, well, it's simple. You're either male or female. And you just want to be like, sweetie, if only that were the case, it would be much easier, would it not? And it sounds simple because that's the version we were given when we were like 7 years old. That's the same era. We were also told things like, don't swim after eating or you're going to die. Gum stays in your stomach for 7 years if you swallow it. And the Bermuda Triangle just eats people up. That one, I still kind of believe because, I love me some paranormal spooky stuff. But these are the myths that we're told when we're little that we sometimes continue to believe into our adulthood. Children's book biology makes things sound tidy, but adults, we know life is absolute chaos. We know that nothing fits perfectly in a box, not even Amazon orders, which mine was supposed to be delivered today between 4 a.m. and 8 a.m. and it never came. And it is now 4:30 p.m. So, anywho, the idea that gender and sex are these clean, binary, immutable, no questions asked categories is just, well, it's adorable, but it's wrong. Adorable, but fucking wrong. The truth is, biological sex is a whole cocktail of traits, not a yes or no checkbox. Chromosomes, hormones, brain structure, secondary sex characteristics, gonads, external anatomy, and none of these line up perfectly for everyone. About 1 to 2% of the population is intersex. That's millions of people. When you say the 1 to 2%, it's like, oh, that's small, but it's millions of people. And even among non-intersex people, there is huge natural variation. And if this was more acceptable in today's culture, that percentage would be a lot higher. So when someone says there are only two sexes, what they really mean is, I am deeply committed to the coloring book version of biology. And bless their hearts. You know what that means, right? When people from the South say bless their hearts, it's more of a fuck you. I'm not from the South, so I don't know why I went there, but whatever. But let's talk brain science, because yes, scientists have studied this a lot. And despite what your cousin Chad said on Facebook, things are different. And one of the most consistent findings, transgender people have brain patterns that align more closely with their experienced gender than their assigned sex. Let me explain that in normal human language. Studies using brain scans like MRI, fMRI, diffusion imaging, all the alphabet soups of brain scans have looked at things like brain structure, white matter pathways, how certain regions respond to stimuli, and the results repeat over and over. Trans people's brains look and function in ways that are more similar to the gender they identify as. The same as somebody who is born female and identifies as female. When they study the brain, there are characteristics across all women like that are patterns. And it's not 100%, it's not universal, not the brain is pink or blue, not that kind of thing, but there are consistent patterns. And again, here is an example. Trans women often show similarities to cisgender women in certain brain regions linked to body perception. Trans men often show similarities to cisgender men in regions linked to spatial perception or how the brain processes body ownership. And like, that's all confusing because most people, like you and I, regular people, are not studying the brain. And we just have to take the scientist's word for this. Like, science is science, people. I think we've been forgetting that a lot lately. Okay, and one famous finding, the BSTC, a tiny little area in the hypothalamus. I don't know where that hypothalamus is, but you can Google it and find out. But the hypothalamus in trans women, it tends to be the size typically found in cisgender women. In trans men, it tends to align with the size of cisgender men. And this was found even in trans people who never took hormones, who had not started hormone therapy, meaning this isn't caused by transition. It's not social influence. It's not TikTok did it. It's who they fucking are. And that holds a lot of weight. Let that sink in. The brain is literally saying, hey, we're this gender. Please adjust accordingly. The brain is literally telling you, you are a man or you are a woman or you are somewhere in between that spectrum, whether you were born with those physical characteristics or not. And if anything, being trans isn't a choice. We know that. Ignoring that message would be the choice. Ignoring the science is a choice. But what about DNA? Oh, good Lord, honey. DNA is messy. DNA is crazy. But everyone acts like DNA is this perfect little script that says you are male or you are female. But if DNA were that clean, we wouldn't need whole books and labs and Netflix series explaining how it works. God, I am so into this episode today. I'm really passionate about this shit. Chromosomes help determine sex, but they don't do it alone. Most people have XX or XY, sure, but there are also XXY, XYY, XO, or XXX if you have an OnlyFans. No, I'm just kidding, but there is XXX. There's mosaics, which are different chromosomes in different cells and variations inside the XY chromosomes that change how bodies develop. There's so much science to it that you really got to think back to high school. I don't even know how I graduated or passed science or biology, so this is like all new to me again. And here is the real gaggity gag. Having XY chromosomes doesn't guarantee someone develops male traits. There are genetic variations where XY individuals develop as female, or where XX individuals develop traits usually called male. I'm doing male in quotations. This is where the biology is complicated fans start sweating. And it is complicated. So, for gender identity, research suggests that DNA may also influence how the brain develops its sense of gender. There's evidence of genetic markers related to hormone signaling, genes linked to how the brain responds to sex hormones, patterns that differ slightly in transgender people versus cisgender populations. Nothing says this gene makes someone trans, because humans are not iPhone apps. It's not that easy. But there are genetic influences that shape how someone's brain develops identity. And let's think of it like this. DNA doesn't give you a script. It gives you a vibe, a feeling, and your body develops from that vibe. Another big factor is hormone exposure in the womb. Most scientists agree that gender identity is formed early, like before you are even born, because in pregnancy, there are critical windows where the brain develops sensitivity to hormones like testosterone or estrogen. If the levels are higher or lower during the brain's development, even slightly, the brain can masculinize or feminize differently than the body does. So you can absolutely have a body that develops one way and a brain that develops the other. And this is not unusual. It is not a mistake, and it is not broken biology. I think about this very often when I think about myself. For example, I am more on the feminine side. I never got that really deep voice when I was growing up, in comparison to all the other guys. I didn't grow really tall. I always gravitated towards art and dance. And I've always thought about how, obviously I'm gay, but I've always thought about how complex the body is. And we don't know the brain. We haven't mapped it all out yet. But when I think about the spectrum, I hope this is making sense. I think about my brain developing one way more to the feminine side and my body developing more to the masculine side. I'm also like 5'7" and 150 pounds. So like I'm a smaller framed human as well, but I still identify as a man. I still have some masculine traits in there somewhere, but I do think that my brain patterns might be on that vibe of the more feminine side of being. But it doesn't mean that I identify as female. I hope that made sense. It's just so complicated. The fact that a man and a woman, a biological man and a biological woman can have sex, and from these tiny little cells, your body grows an entire human, and you think that it is just going to be either completely male, like fucking lumberjack, or completely female ballerina over here. Like, that is so wild and so cut and dry, and that is so black and white thinking, and completely lacks any science, and really has no base. It really has no credibility. So anyway, this is nature doing what nature does best. Being extra, being unpredictable, and refusing to fit into 2 columns on a spreadsheet. That basically wrapped up exactly what I was trying to say. So if the science is clear, why do people still freak out? And the short answer, again, is people hate complexity. We like it simple, don't we? People want gender to be simple because simple feels safe. I talked about this in my black and white thinking episode about living in the gray. Keeping things simple, either yes or no, or love or hate, makes life a bit easier until you realize that's a farce. But because they were taught The world is binary, good or bad, right or wrong, tacos or salad, and anything that breaks that pattern makes their brain completely glitch like an old Dell computer. Fuck, don't you remember those days? Maybe if you're not my age, but dial-up was a bitch. But let's be honest though. Let's be honest. People are very dramatic, and some folks feel personally attacked by the idea that gender is flexible, or that biology has layers, or that someone else's identity doesn't revolve around their need for everything to be neat and tidy. Cough, cough, Nancy Mace. Like, I want her to sit down with a scientist, with someone who's very well educated, to explain this science of biology to her, to help her realize that not only is she wildly wrong and insanely transphobic and, in my opinion, kind of a horrible person who has no concept of what real life is like, clearly, but she's wrong. She's straight up wrong. She needs to be educated. She needs to read a book. Perhaps she needs to listen to this episode. But this episode is not about Nancy Mace. Let's bring it back to what this episode is actually about. So the truth in all of this is that being trans, again, is not a new thing. Like I said at the top of the episode, it didn't come into the limelight in 2016 all of a sudden. But obviously, with social media and the trans community feeling maybe more comfortable being a part of society, more people are going to come out. And trans people have existed in every culture throughout history. Native American Two-Spirit people, Hijra in South Asia, Fa'afafine in Samoa. Gender diversity is ancient. Humans did not invent being trans. We just finally got better at talking about it. Like, a little bit better, not a lot better, but a little bit. And the human part of this is why it matters so much. Everything that I have said so far is science, facts, data. But let's talk about the heart of this. People, real people that are trying to live real, genuine, authentic lives. Trans people are just people whose inner identity does not match the physical template that they were given. Not because of confusion, not because of social pressure, not because of trends, and definitely not because they want attention. I've had a few people that I know say that to me about people they are related to, that, oh, it's just a phase or it's this and that. And that is not the thing you want to say. So if you're listening to this and you've said that to me, let's not do it again. And trust me, if they wanted attention, there are far easier ways to get it than fighting Congress on whether you have the right to exist or not. Like, nobody is going to pretend to be trans for attention. There are a gazillion other ways they can find attention. It's just how they were made. And honoring that and respecting that is quite literally the bare minimum that you and I and we can do. If your brain and your identity do not line up, you have two choices: live in distress or transition in whatever way feels right for you. And every major medical organization agrees, supporting trans people in living as themselves leads to better mental health, better well-being, better quality of life, and denying that does, of course, the complete opposite. This isn't morality. It's not politics, although it has become it, but it's not, and it shouldn't be. And it's not a culture war. It's human beings wanting to live in peace. And let's end this section on this. Gender isn't broken. What's broken is our system. The real issue isn't trans people. It's that we have built a world based on the assumption that everyone fits neatly into only two boxes. And now that people are saying, actually, I don't fit here, I don't feel comfortable here, this is not who I am, the system is freaking the fuck out. But that's the thing. The world is not breaking. It's updating. We continue to update throughout history. We're just installing a patch that should have been uploaded centuries ago. Trans people are not the glitch in all of this. Binary thinking is the glitch. People's identities are not the problem. Our limited imagination is the problem. And the more we learn from science, from history, from actual lived experiences, and meeting trans people and talking to them about who they are and how they feel, the more obvious that this all becomes. Being trans is fucking real. It is natural, scientifically supported part of human diversity, and it always has been. And honestly, the world is better when people get to be themselves. And I can tell you from firsthand experience, because I know a lot of people have never met somebody trans. I can almost guarantee, I think, that Most people I'm related to in Canada, in, the towns that I grew up in and where my families still live, probably have not met somebody that is trans, or maybe they have and didn't realize it, but not spent enough time with them to get to know them and to really understand who they are. Even lesbians or gay people, although we did have two lesbian neighbors, Donna and Sandy. I forgot about that. That was nice. Um, but you have to put yourself in a situation in which maybe some of you might be uncomfortable because you've never met a trans person, but when you do, you find this authenticity, the way that they are, the trans people that I have met are so real. There's an energy about them. There is a being, there is a vibe because they have chosen to live the most authentic life possible. They are unapologetic, they are real, and they're some of my favorite people. So, next up, we're going to go on a little time travel adventure because apparently a lot of people have convinced themselves that gender diversity was invented on TikTok. Again, no, not the case. Like someone woke up, brewed a matcha, and said, let's create a whole new concept today. What about like being trans? But the truth, humans have been playing the gender bending, gender ignoring, gender transcending, and straight up laughing at gender since the dawn of civilization. Literally before pants were invented. That's not a joke. Before pants were invented, before forks, before toothpaste, people were already out here being like, gender? I don't know her. And as always, I'll probably pronounce a lot of things wrong, but I'm not a dictionary, so oopsie. But we're jumping from ancient temples to tribal traditions to royal courts to modern day cultures that are still way more open than half the comment sections on the internet. So let's get into this little time travel. We're going to start with the past because it wasn't conservative. People just don't like to read books now or educate themselves. So what we're living in now is not the way it always has been. And let's start with something very simple. History was not straight. History was not binary. And history was definitely not modest. People love to romanticize the past as if everyone was a wholesome little man or woman living their cute binary life, baking bread and not having feelings, like fucking Beauty and the Beast village type shit. Meanwhile, actual history is like men in eyeliner, pharaohs in wigs, shamans changing gender, warriors dressing as women, people living as a third gender, priests castrating themselves as devotion, and societies literally having entire gender categories that we don't even have names for. That is what the past looked like. Humans have always been creative with gender. We are the ones now trying to shove them back into boxes. And that only came into play with Western culture when we moved over here. Thanksgiving is coming, so it's like the anniversary of. But when we came over here from England or wherever, and we just took over and implemented this certain way of thinking and way of being that was men are masculine, women are feminine. That is when the cut and dry two boxes, the blue and pink box, came into play. Pink box. If you get it, you get it. Let's start with one of my favorite places on the planet. I have not been there, but I love studying this in school, ancient Egypt. Ancient Egypt might be the origin of gender as a vibe. And maybe that's why I loved it so much, why I just vibed with learning about Egypt. I love documentaries about Egypt. That's probably why I was so into it. Men, they wore makeup, okay? Women shaved their heads and wore wigs. Everyone wore eyeliner so sharp that it could kill a man. I think Taylor Swift said that, right? Jewelry wasn't gendered. It was mandatory. And I imagine that was for, the richer people, not the people building the pyramids. Egyptian gods also switch genders, like we hopefully change our underwear. The god Hapi, I want to say, for example, was male, but depicted with breasts to symbolize fertility. The god Atum was literally described as creating himself and then creating the world through, let's say, self-generated fluids. Gender boundaries, never heard of her in ancient Egypt. It's not a thing. And then there's Queen Hatshepsut, a woman who ruled as pharaoh, wore the royal beard, used male titles, and said, yes, I am king now. Deal with it. Ancient Egyptians were not confused. They were like, Gender is an aesthetic. Do whatever you want to do. I mean, as far as we know from studying ancient Egyptian culture. And then we have indigenous cultures that were way ahead of the curve. Long before Europeans showed up clutching their pearls, indigenous cultures across the world already recognized more than two genders. For example, Native American cultures had two-spirit people. Many tribes have recognized two-spirit people for centuries, often seen as gifted, spiritual, and respected. And depending on the tribe, there were specific roles: healers, matchmakers, storytellers, caretakers of sacred traditions. Some tribes had four or more gender categories, and nobody panicked. Nobody held a press conference. It was just a part of life. I'm going to butcher this really bad. The Fa'afafine of Samoa. Fuck, someone's going to come for me for that. Samoa? Shit. Samoa has a recognized third gender, Fa'afafine, assigned male at birth, but living as women or in between genders. They're embraced in culture, they contribute to families, they exist openly, and society literally makes space for them, socially, legally, and spiritually. Imagine that. A society that actually accommodates humans instead of yelling at them online and from the White House and telling them that they have to be something different. Wouldn't it be nice to have a society that accommodates? Then we have the Hijra of South Asia. Hijra communities have existed for thousands of years. They appear in Hindu scripture. They held respected roles as performers, blessing givers, and spiritual figures. The modern world has tried to erase them, yes, but they are still legally recognized today as a third gender. Some countries in South Asia have ID cards that literally say male, female, or third gender. Meanwhile, some people here in the United States and Canada are still freaking out about pronouns, and other countries literally have third gender on their ID cards. It's crazy. And speaking of crazy, let's talk about ancient Greece and Rome, because they were wild. Ancient Greece and Rome are the original, the OG reality shows. People acted like the binary was optional. And, well, it is. But in Greek mythology, gods transformed genders constantly. Dionysus, the god of wine and chaos, was basically non-binary vibes: soft, feminine clothing, long flowing hair, worship rituals that blurred gender norms. The Greeks were like, we created philosophy. We invented democracy. Also, here's a god in a dress. Do with that what you will. And then in Rome, men wore tunics, makeup, and jewelry. Actors performed gender-swapped roles as a normal thing. Some emperors openly lived or presented in ways we now understand as trans or gender-expansive, like Elagabalus, I think that's right, who requested to be called a woman, sought a vaginoplasty centuries before modern medicine, and lived openly feminine while being emperor. Imagine if Fox News existed in ancient Rome. The whole entire network would just combust. Everything would go up in flames if they did a news story about that emperor. And let's move to Southeast Asia, where gender was never two options. They actually recognize 5 genders, not 2, 5. These include cisgender men, cisgender women, Kalabai, which were assigned male and live as women, Kalale, which were assigned female and live as men, and Bisu, who embody both genders spiritually. This is not new. This is not modern. This goes back hundreds, maybe thousands of years. Imagine 5 genders. It's mind-blowing. And in Thailand, we've got ladyboys who have existed long before tourism, long before Western influence. They have deep cultural roots and have been part of Thai society for generations. And even in Africa, there's some history that was completely whitewashed out, which should come as no surprise. Pre-colonial Africa had far more gender diversity than what's often taught. In Ghana, their languages historically describe gender roles, not bodies, meaning a person could socially be recognized as a man or woman regardless of anatomy. The Yoruba, their traditional society, didn't even structure people strictly by gender. It was far more about age and status and role. In ancient Nubia, depictions of rulers showed fluid gender presentation, queens styled like kings, kings portrayed in traditionally feminine stances or dress, and Western history books skip that part. Convenient, right? They skip basically everything I just went through. Let's talk about medieval Europe. Surprise, that wasn't straight either. I also loved learning about medieval times, and that's probably why. We love to imagine medieval Europe as this pure conservative time, but baby, no. No, no, no. We had cross dressing saints. There were literally saints who lived as a different gender for their entire lives. Saint Marinos, assigned female, lived his whole life as a monk. Saint Anastasia, Saint Hildegund, the church found out after they died, and a few were even canonized. Imagine being so respected in your role that no one questions your gender for decades. And I've said this before, but men wore heels. Men invented heels. They invented them for men. They were worn by men, and they were seen as masculine. I've said it a very long time ago on episode who knows what. But one point in time, a man decided, let's market high heels towards women, and that's why women wear them. They were made for men originally. The idea that heels are girly is like 300 years old. That's it. In the grand scheme of the earth being a thing, or not even the earth, but in terms of human history. Humans just make rules up and then pretend that they came from fucking God. They didn't. Asia had gender diversity for millennia. Japan has kabuki theater, which is male actors performing as women, but not mockingly, elegantly, professionally respected as an art form. And China, Mulan is based on real traditions. Gender crossing warriors show up in literature throughout Chinese history, not because it was scandalous, because it was normal storytelling. In the Philippines, pre-colonial Filipino shamans and priestesses were often trans women or feminine presenting people assigned male at birth. The culture treated them as sacred. Can you imagine if we treated trans people as sacred? I would be so fucking down for that. Then colonizers show up and we're like, stop that right away. That's not how we do things. As always, the fucking white man comes on in and ruins everything. That's why America has no fucking culture. Because we came here and we were like, guess we'll make some hot dogs and play some fucking football. Like, really? That's it? All right. That was a mouthful. That was a lot of history, a lot of little snippets. I could have done entire episodes about every single one. Maybe I will in the future. We'll see. So you might be wondering, as I was, why were past cultures more chill about gender? And honestly, because they didn't have Victorian, European gender rules messing everything up. For most of human history, gender was flexible. Roles were assigned by skill or spirituality. Community mattered more than rigid identity labels. No one cared if your clothes matched your chromosomes. The obsession with biological sex equals destiny is actually a very recent invention, just like microwaves or Disney adults. Disney adults be cray sometimes. Colonialism and Christianity pushed strict binaries onto cultures that had never lived that way. That's why the modern world seems more rigid. It's not tradition that it's that way. It's just colonizer energy. It's giving colonizer, okay? I should get a shirt that, oh my God, I should make a shirt that says that. It's giving colonizer. But trademarking that, said it on this episode, new shirts coming soon. But other cultures, they still get it right today. We may not get it right here in the West, but some other cultures do. So while some places are screaming about bathrooms, Texas, other cultures around the world are still living in harmony with gender diversity today. And I'm not saying everything else in these cultures is hunky-dory and wonderful. I'm not saying that even women have equal rights, but it's just interesting to look and see. So India legally recognizes a third gender. Nepal issues passports with other. Pakistan allows self-ID for third gender categories. Mexico has communities with a recognized third gender. Canada and several European countries offer non-binary passports. And Samoa continues to embrace Fa'afafine as part of their culture. Meanwhile, in the United States, some people think that the entire world is ending and or on fire if someone shares their pronouns with you, and they might differ than what you expect. Humans have always been trans, they've always been non-binary, and they've always been gender expansive. The only difference now is visibility, not existence. Visibility, we can see it more. We have television, we have podcasts, we have social media. Visibility. Gender diversity didn't appear suddenly out of nowhere. It resurfaced after centuries of being pushed underground. If anything, the present is more like the ancient world than the last 200 years were. More fluidity, more self expression, more acceptance, more understanding of identity. Humanity is just rediscovering itself, basically. And the gag again is that gender has never been the binary system that people think. When people say two genders is the only way, that's the way it has always been, male or female, I want to hand them a museum ticket or a textbook or literally any evidence from any century because the receipts are absolutely endless. Statues, myths, writings, rituals, clothing, legal documents, religious roles. Gender has always been a spectrum. It's been a playground, a performance, a spiritual experience, a social role, a personal truth. Human beings have never been confined to two categories until recent history. Some people just want to pretend that they always were. And think about this. This is what you can say to anyone who just thinks there's only male and female. What if we're not inventing new genders? What if we are remembering them? Think about this. Maybe modern gender liberation isn't radical. Maybe it is not new. Maybe we are simply returning to how humans used to be before rigid Western rules tightened everything up. Maybe we're reconnecting with the freedom of ancient cultures, the openness of indigenous societies, the gender play of ancient Egypt, the spiritual gender roles of Asia and the Pacific, the complexity that has always been inside of us, every single solitary human being. Maybe we are not rewriting history, we're correcting it. And what I love is that maybe being trans or non-binary isn't an exception. Maybe it is a part of the original settings. And honestly, humanity has always been more fabulous, more fluid, and more creative than the binary allows. We're just finally acknowledging it again and receiving a lot of pushback. And I will always remember, I think it was Trump that said this recently, but this is like a tale as old as time, that it is easier to control a stupid, uneducated nation than it is people that are educated and can see beyond this country. There are so many people, millions of people who have never left the United States, who only watch very American conservative shows, who don't know what it is like outside of their small town or their small bubble and have no desire to. And there's nothing wrong with that, except when hatred comes in to play. When you think about the education system, the way it is shifting now, and they're going to be teaching more conservative values in school, you're taking away actual history. You're rewriting history. Trump has done that and showed that in the museums, in spots across the nation where tourists goes, removing things about slavery, telling museums that their displays or exhibitions are far too critical of United States culture. But that is what happened. Slavery happened, so we can't ignore it. Just like we cannot ignore that being trans has been a part of human history as long as we have existed. So when you think about that, maybe you're someone listening who disagrees with this. I find it hard to believe that somebody listening might disagree, or if you've even made it this far. But they don't want you to be educated. They don't want you to experience more because that means you will stand up and you'll push against them. Well, they keep getting fucking richer and just control us and do Lord knows what with our taxes. Like, really, they're not helping us. You just have to think about the big picture. I'm not going to go down that conspiracy rabbit hole. Well, it's not really a conspiracy. That's reality. But presidents have said it time and time again. It is easier to control a stupid, uneducated nation than it is people that are actually worldly. I think if you've been listening for a while, you know where I'm going with that. But before we wrap this up, we have to get into this listener letter because, listen, I've been ranting, I've been raving, I've been educating, I've been lecturing, I've been TED talking, all of it. But sometimes it's really nice to hear someone with, actual education and degrees, somebody back me up with the real knowledge. And I have a listener letter, and it comes from a longtime listener who also happens to be a doctor slash scientist. We love that. So basically, someone who has spent way more money on school than I ever did, because the day I graduated high school, I was like, nope, no more for me. And they are here to add their own perspective. And honestly, a lot of what they say is stuff I already touched on, but it hits different when it's coming from somebody who's literally studied for years and devoted their life to this work. So let's get into this listener letter. Hey Josh, longtime listener, first time writer, and full transparency, I'm a medical doctor and researcher who has spent the past 20 years studying neurodevelopment, endocrinology, and how identity forms in the brain. This is the person that we needed to hear from. So when I listened to one of your previous episodes in support of the trans community, I was basically nodding my head so hard, I almost gave myself whiplash. Get it? I wanted to share a little more from a scientific standpoint because honestly, if people even knew a fraction of what we understand about sex development, gender identity, and the brain, we wouldn't still be having these debates. But here we are. Let me start by saying this. Gender is not simple. It is not binary. It is not XY equals boy, XX equals girl, unless you want biology explained at the same depth as a children's coloring book. I don't mean that to sound condescending. I'm saying it because for decades, the education system has been restricted, watered down, oversimplified, or outright censored because of religious and political influence. And that censorship has consequences. When the science teachers aren't allowed to teach actual genetics or the complexity of sex development or the existence of intersex conditions or the fact that hormone exposure in the womb can shape brain identity differently from physical anatomy, you end up with adults who truly believe basic biology is a real scientific concept and not a slogan invented for arguments on the internet. I should have just read this letter first because this is basically everything I just said. Could have just read a letter and be done with the episode, right? Okay, they continue. So here's the scientific reality from someone who sees this in research every day. 1, chromosomes don't determine gender identity, they barely determine sex. Everyone knows XX and XY, but they don't realize that you can be XX and develop male. You can be XY and develop female. You can have mosaic genetics where some cells are XX and some are XY. You can have complete androgen insensitivity where the body doesn't respond to testosterone at all. Nature loves variation. The binary is a human invention, not a biological law. 2, gender identity forms in the brain very early, long before birth. The brain is exposed to hormonal signaling patterns while it's developing. These patterns influence things like body perception, identity development, social cognition, how the brain responds to estrogen or testosterone later in life. When these patterns don't align with the development of the body, you get what we scientifically call gender incongruence. This is not confusion. This is not a trend. This is not social media influenced. This is biology doing what biology does, which is being complicated. Number 3, brain imaging is extremely consistent. When we scan the brains of transgender people, we see structural and functional patterns that align more closely with their identified gender than the assigned sex, especially in regions involving self-perception, body integration, and social processing. These findings repeat over decades and across cultures. We see it in MRI, fMRI, diffusion tensor imaging, neuroendocrine studies. If gender identity were just an idea, it wouldn't show up so consistently in brain structure. Thoughts don't create anatomical changes. Development does. I like that. Number 4, transition isn't creating something new. It's aligning the brain and the body. When transgender people medically transition, whether hormonally or surgically, we're not changing their gender. We're aligning the physical body with the neurological identity that was already there. I just got full body chills. That makes so much fucking sense when you put it like that. That's why the mental health outcomes improve so dramatically. That's why major medical organizations support transition care. That's why denying care is dangerous. You're just aligning the body to how the brain is firing and functioning. The wording of that really made that sink in for me. That really made that make sense. Number 5, Religion has warped people's idea of biology. Let me be blunt. Science education in this country has been hacked to pieces by religious and political pressure. Teachers avoid explaining intersex variations because parents complain. Schools avoid teaching about gender development because it's treated as ideological. Anything that challenges the binary is labeled as inappropriate. So you get entire generations who think that sex is determined by one chromosome, gender equals genitals, biology is destiny, and anything outside of that is new or unnatural or made up. If we taught actual biology, the kind we teach in medical school, not the Sunday school safe version, most people would come to the same conclusion that the scientific community already has. Being transgender is a natural, biological variation of human development. It is not rare, it is not unnatural, it is not modern, and it is not a mistake. It is simply one of the many ways that human beings exist. Number 6, shame and misinformation hurt people more than being trans ever could. The real tragedy here isn't that people don't understand the science, it's the harm that misunderstanding causes. The number of transgender patients I've treated who grew up thinking something was wrong with them is heartbreaking. Not because anything was wrong with them, but because nobody around them had the education to explain what they were experiencing. Imagine if we taught kids biology in its real complexity. Gender as a natural spectrum, identity as a product of brain development, and human diversity as a normal part of life. Imagine the suffering we could prevent. Number 7, the world would look completely different with real science education. If we weren't still basing half our curriculum on 1800s religious values, people would know that chromosomes are not binary, hormones vary, sex characteristics vary, brains vary, and identity varies. And none of this is new. We've known much of this for decades. What's new is the resistance to teaching it. And that always makes me think, like, we don't teach that stuff, but you make us watch a video of a woman giving birth in sex ed class? Like, come on. Anyway, that's all I have. That's a great way to end it. Thanks for taking the time to read my letter. It's refreshing and honestly rare to hear someone speak about transgender issues with both compassion and accuracy. So if you need someone to fact check future episodes regarding the science of it all or dive deeper into the neurobiology side of things, I'm happy to help. From Dr. A Real Scientist. Obviously not their real name, but oh, P.S. My peers and I love the show. Oh, thank you. I love listener letters. They make me emo. No, I'm not crying. I cried on that first listener letter. I'm not crying this time. I just think it's so cool, not to talk about me, but I just think it's so cool that people actually take the time to like write in. Because like I listen to these other huge podcasts that have listener letter episodes and I'm like, I wonder if that will ever happen. And I just think it's really, really cool that people share their stories and share these important things with me so that I can share them with you. So thank you, Dr. A Real Scientist, for basically saying all the things that I just said and kind of backing me up. So I really appreciate that. But that is our episode today. We covered science, we covered history, we covered brain scans, chromosomes, ancient cultures, gods and eyeliner, third genders, 5 genders, gender roles that had nothing to do with genitals, and a scientist who basically said if people actually learned biology, half these arguments wouldn't exist. Good God. We did a lot. Holy shit, we did a lot today. That's how much I love my trans peeps. So here is the takeaway. Trans people, hello, they are not new. Trans people are not unnatural. Trans people are not modern. Trans people are human. And humans have always existed in more than 2 flavors. Like imagine if you only had vanilla and chocolate ice cream. What a fucking bore. The world only looks rigid if you've been taught a rigid version of it. Once you zoom out, you realize that gender diversity is one of the most normal things about humanity. Boringly normal, even. People have been doing this forever. It's not news. So, if you're trans, questioning, non-binary, gender-expansive, or just vibing somewhere on the identity spectrum, I love you. I see you, and you belong here on this fucking planet. And if you're listening because you're trying to learn, thank you. That's what this is all about. Curiosity is a love language, and honestly, it's how change happens. And if you're listening because you wanted to be mad, well, Thanks for the stream, bestie. Keep being mad. But I hope this is more about education and kind of opening our minds up to what the world has always been like. So until next time, be kind, be curious, and for the love of science, please stop pretending that the human body is a MacBook with only two settings. And also follow me on social media, TikTok and Instagram at _hotairpod. And submit your listener letters and topic suggestions on my website, hotairwithjoshuarobert.com. And until next time, I'll see you next Tuesday.